This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenawalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, Maura Donley.
Hello,
Hi,
Charlie.
Hi, Maura. Why, there have been all kinds of interesting things happening since we were together last.
Okay.
Turning Beaver Stadium into an ice stadium.
Wasn't that cool?
One of the largest ice stadium in the world, I believe.
Both the women's and the men's got to play. I think that's very cool. Really
and Penn State is now, Michigan State was one of the best teams, and Penn State really played them well.
Yeah, hung in there, didn't they?
Yeah. So some interesting things at Happy Valley. James Franklin might not be there, but we have a good hockey team.
It's a new day.
Well, we also have a new day today that we're lucky enough to have as a special guest State Representative Jim Struzzi, who is the Republican Appropriation Committee Chair. Representative, you were nice enough, I think, to join us last year to help throw some light on the budget from last year. So we're very thankful for you to come back again this year. Could the governor delivered his budget address the other day? We'll just throw it to you and say, what were the highlights of that address?
Well, there was a lot there,
And
obviously.
The
Yes.
I'll let you pick your points.
I have sat through, this would be my fourth budget address from Governor Shapiro. And every year I hold out hope that he will actually be more realistic in his spending proposal that aligns with our actual expected revenues. And every year he disappoints me. This year I was really hoping, given the bipartisan approach that we finally adopted in last year's budget to get us to a finalized budget in November, that he might learn some lessons, perhaps realize that we all need to work together, set more realistic expectations. But sadly, I was disappointed again on Tuesday. When the governor came out with his budget proposal, going through the speech, which you don't hear the numbers in the speech because I don't think the governor wants Pennsylvania residents to hear the numbers of the spend. But the governor has proposed a $53.26 billion spending proposal for this upcoming fiscal year. That is far in excess of our expected revenues of about $47 billion for this upcoming fiscal year, creating roughly a $6.4 billion gap. So right from the beginning with the governor's proposal, we have challenges ahead of us. Now, the governor has proposed drawing down our rainy day fund to about $4.5 billion, and then creating the new taxes that he's been proposing for several years now, and taxing and regulating skill games, legalizing recreational marijuana, increasing the minimum wage, and combined reporting, which would fill the other proposed gap of about $1.8 billion. But that really concerns me. When the governor took office just a few short years ago, he basically inherited a $13 billion surplus in the rainy day fund and in our budgetary surplus. Every year, as I said, his spending has exceeded revenues, so that has been drawn down. And now we're looking at only about $7.5 billion left in the rainy day fund. The governor wants to take another $4.5 or so out of that. That leaves us with $3 billion. So he's already proposing to use all of our surplus, which was gone in last year's budget, draw down the rainy day fund to leave us with roughly maybe $3 billion next year. After that, where does the money come from? Our spending trends aren't equaling our expected revenues, and unfortunately, at some point, that's going to fall on the taxpayers. That's why we, as House Republicans, as Senate Republicans, have united steadfastly to stop this governor's excessive spending.
Can you help our viewers understand what exactly the rainy day fund is, why it's there, why states put money into it? I think it would be helpful to put that into context for them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's officially called the Budget Stabilization Fund. So in the event that we truly have significant economic downturns or we're in a crisis situation, we are able to fund government.
We've been through that before in Pennsylvania.
Yes,
correct?
And those reserves also help us to build up our credit rating, which helps us when we take out loans or bonds to pay less in interest, and that saves millions of dollars for the taxpayer. So conversely, he wants to eliminate our emergency fund in the event that we truly need it, not in a basically a willingness on his part to spend more money than we have. That is not an emergency, right? That is an ambition, if you will.
It's just trying to balance the budget.
Right. And so that's a true concern, because what do we do when that money is not there? And as you continue to build these expectations and you continue to raise that spending level, it's hard to backpedal that, right? And, we did some great things last year. Our Republican caucus stood together to get rid of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative for Pennsylvania, significant regulatory reform, some permitting reforms. Those will help generate revenues for this Commonwealth, but it's going to take some time. It's only been 3 months since we passed this current year budget. So we need to see that take hold. We need to see that energy investment come back to Pennsylvania, and it will. But for right now, I don't understand where the governor thinks the money is going to come from. And we cannot continue to hurt ourselves financially, basically gambling our future to meet his spending goals.
Well, if the governor wants to use the rainy day fund, did he lay out specifics on why it is a rainy day?
No, that's again, he's done this year after year, and spending down our surplus, now wanting to tap into the rainy day fund. There is no crisis right now in Pennsylvania economically. It is more of, I want to spend this on that, or I want to spend this on that, or I want to make this promise during my speech, which if you watch the speech, I thought it started off well. I'm always attentive. I'm always open-minded. I'm listening to talk about supporting law enforcement, our first responders, protecting our children, growing our workforce, career and tech ed investment. And then it essentially took a turn. And I thought it became very partisan, and I was, to be frank, disappointed, because I know what it took to get last year's budget over the finish line, and it took bipartisan negotiations between all four caucuses. And I think that the governor taking that sort of stance it creates another challenge in and of itself. And I think we always have to caveat that the governor's budget presentation is the starting point, right? Myself and the Democratic Appropriations Chairman, Jordan Harris, will work with our respective committees to really drill down into what these numbers are, where we truly do have obligations to fund, and we know we have some of that, particularly in the human services area. And then where is the excessive spending? Where is the false promises, if you will? And I think that's where we really need to land.
There was one particular aspect of the budget that I thought was very curious. What is the Federal Response Fund?
We're curious about that as well.
Okay, so it's not just me.
maybe that's the emergency that the governor is creating. But he wants to take another $100 million from the rainy day fund, from the budget stabilization fund, to create this Federal Response Fund. We don't know what that is. He briefly mentions it in some of his budget documents as to whatever the federal government either doesn't give or creates as a threat, if you will, to Pennsulvania. I think you can maybe read behind the lines a little bit on that. That's what this is called, right? But again, that's something that we are really going to dig into during the budget hearings as to why this fund is needed, how it's going to be used, how is it going to be regulated and tracked. These are taxpayer dollars. I think that people lose sight when the governor's up there giving his rhetoric and promising this, promising that. People forget that these are their taxpayer dollars. And the more that the governor continues to spend and promise when we don't have the revenues to back it up, the more that burden's going to fall on the taxpayers at a time when people are struggling to make ends meet. We should be focused on lowering cost, making things more affordable, giving people security in their communities. That's what our Republican caucus has been about for many, many years now, and we've united with Senate Republicans to make those things happen. That's why the leverage that we had in this past year's budget will bear fruit for our communities, for our working families, in lowering their energy costs, lowering the cost at the grocery store, because it all compounds upon itself. And I think the baseline, as I've said for many, many years now, is energy. Because if it costs more to heat your home, if it costs more to heat your school or your hospital, if it costs more to get products to the market, things that you need, that's going to translate into more cost for you as a working family. So we need, and we have taken strides as far as our caucuses are concerned, to make that better for Pennsylvanians. And I think the ultimate goal for us is to make life better for Pennsylvania residents.
Well, it was interesting for me to see that the governor is grasping at straws. I mean, again, proposing recreational marijuana.
Right.
We have followed this issue since the whole idea came up of having marijuana used medically. And over and over and over again, we hear, we'll never have recreational marijuana. We'll never have it. Well, now the governor is promoting it in a way just to pay our bills. I think that's sad. And what the governor doesn't realize, I don't know if the legislature has had an opportunity to look in a widespread manner, but all those places that have that have adopted recreational marijuana, for example, good portions of the Netherlands, for example, they're all rethinking it. They're all saying, we're all pulling back, and they're all saying, gee, we are doing some harm to our population, and maybe we need to take another look at this, and maybe the governor ought to take another look at this whole idea of recreational marijuana. How much support is there in the legislature for recreational marijuana?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to look at the projections that the governor has put out there. In this current budget proposal, his estimate is that it's probably going to generate somewhere around $750 million. But the big bulk of that are the front-end fees. Roughly 500, 600 million are in the actual upfront fees that they're proposing for people who want to be distributors of the recreational marijuana.
So that's just to set up a dispensary or something?
Yes, and it's a one-time influx into the budget. And what we've learned from our neighboring states is that that is not true. Those fees aren't going to bear out. These distributors aren't willing to pay those excessive fees. And so right there, that number is misleading and erroneous. And then, as you said, there are just a plethora of social problems that come with legalizing recreational marijuana. Family issues, workforce issues, how do you account for CDL drivers, mental health issues at a time when, again, our human services costs are the biggest chunk of the budget. Right now, we're looking at roughly 40+% of this current budget and the upcoming budget are going to be for human services. You don't have to go very far to look at the mental health crisis, and I think that everyone's affected by that. And you add in recreational marijuana, make it more accessible for young people. I think that there should be some very real concerns about that. You have to look beyond these numbers, because it's not about numbers. It's about families. It's about growing our communities, keeping our communities safe, building a future for our young people. And if you make marijuana more readily available, it's already out there, in ways that it shouldn't be. I think it's a downward slope that is not going to be good for our society.
Well, as we wrap up here today, what are your caucus's primary initiatives? What are you looking for in this budget?
Well, I think we need to, first and foremost, to get that spend number down to a more realistic approach. I know that there's always give and take in budget negotiations, but for us, it's about workforce development. We know that we're going to have a lot of energy companies coming into Pennsylvania. The data centers are going to require a tremendous workforce. We have to wrap our head around what that looks like, but we need to make things more affordable, continue to increase our energy production for this Commonwealth, continue to streamline permitting, regulatory reform. We need to make sure that we're improving quality of life for Pennsylvania residents, keeping our community safe, and making sure that young people in Pennsylvania, working families, want to be here, want to come back to Pennsylvania, grow our existing businesses, again, through cutting down some of that government red tape. There's a lot of misinformation out there, I think, when it comes to where we're headed and the things that are happening with these data centers. In my community, it's the epicenter, because we have the Homer City Redevelopment Project, and they're building a gas-fired electric plant to provide the energy for these data centers. So all this talk of worries about energy and water, I think, are simply talk. I don't think it's been proven. So getting off tangent a little bit, but I think the bottom line for us is we need to make life more affordable for Pennsylvanians. We need to continue to grow our economy and really create a sustainable future for this Commonwealth.
Okay, well, we appreciate you coming here. We, unfortunately, we always need twice as much time as we
Yep.
have with you.
You'll
So
have to
we-
come back.
Absolutely. Always
Please,
happy
Maura
to.
and I both would love to have a update in the not too distant future.
Sure.
So when is the budget going to be completed this year?
As always, by June 30th. Right?
And you heard it here first. We'll be right back with the next segment of Behind the Headlines after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. On this segment of Behind the Headlines, Maura and I are fortunate enough to have with us Jason Wagner. Jason is the Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Associated Constructors. We're so glad to have you on the program today, Jason. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Charlie. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. We generally have, many times we have Bob Latham who comes and represents
boss.
your group. And he always has much to say and much to share with us and our viewers. We were wondering if you might, since the governor just delivered his budget address, we figured that there was much in there that was of interest to you and your group. And we wanted to give you a chance to point out one or two of the highlights, and then we'll talk about those and zero in on those. If Maura agrees.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for the opportunity. I know Bob has a long reputation of talking for the transportation industry, and they're big shoes to fill. But I'm glad to be here. Quite frankly, we've been in a situation where transportation has kind of risen to one of the top three major issues in Pennsylvania politics today in terms of funding. If you recall, it's been 13 years since the last major funding bill passed in what we call Act 89. And so we're really at a point where we were hoping to see a budget that would recognize a multimodal transportation approach to fixing the needs that now exist out there. And in this particular budget that we heard yesterday, we didn't quite get to see anything for the highways and bridges in that budget. The governor did put some things in for the public transit, and I think that is good for their needs, but right now we are back to the drawing board in terms of what we're going to do for transportation funding.
So when you say multimodal, you're talking bridges, roads, and public transit, correct?
Absolutely. Multimodal has always been a theme of Pennsylvania transportation policy. We have not been successful, quite frankly, in having one mode of transportation against the other. And if you look at the past history of transportation funding bills, they've always been bipartisan. Transportation, roads, bridges, public transit.
Shouldn't be partisan.
Absolutely not. And we've never wanted it, nor is it partisan in terms of there aren't Republican roads or Democrat roads, there are roads.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
same with buses and trains and all of those things. So we believe that a multimodal comprehensive approach makes sense for all of Pennsylvania. We're a diverse state, as you know, where we've got rural components and urban centers that have different transportation needs, and we need a multimodal approach to solve them on a statewide basis.
So tell us a little bit about, I know in the past there's been a lot of discussion, and we've talked to Bob about this over and over again, money coming out of transportation funding going to the state police. Can you give us a little bit more detail on that for this budget?
Yeah, and I should say that, this is an area that we as, the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors applaud the great work that our state police do. And this is not an issue of whether or not we should or should not fund the state police. We are absolutely, in fact, we work with them when we do, we want state police presence on our highways, especially when we're out there working. So, but this is an issue of it's how we fund the state police. And really at the root of this is the transportation fund is a user fee funded system. And for decades, a large portion of the motor license fund, if you will, has been taken to go fund the general operations of the state police. So we are advocating, and the General Assembly has been moving back the amount of money that is coming from this motor license fund for the state police for the last 10 years since the Act 89 bill. But last year the General Assembly decided to stop that at $250 million. And in this budget, the governor proposed to flatline it again at $250 million. And we were on a track to get that to zero, and the general fund would then pick up those costs. However, we were a little disappointed to see that the governor proposed to flatline it, and that'll be a legislative priority, because to put it in perspective of what $250 million means, that approximately that it's equivalent to about 5 cents of the gas tax. So approximately 5 cents of what Pennsylvanians pay in fuel taxes is going to support the general operations of the state police. And we just believe that if you move the state police out of the motor license fund, that'll free up additional dollars for what its intended purpose, which is road and bridge projects.
One of the statistics that smacked me in the face was the realization that Pennsylvania has seen a 41% drop in asphalt that we use to resurface state roads. It seems that we would need just as much as ever or more. How did this come about, that we almost are using half the amount of asphalt that we have in the past to resurface our roads?
Yeah. Well, quite honestly, it's the impact of inflation, and construction inflation over the past 5 years has been pretty significant within our industry. And so therefore, to your point, every transportation dollar is absolutely critical to get to transportation. And that statistic that you mentioned shows that we're basically doing less with the same amount of money that we've been receiving from both the state and the federal government, quite frankly. We have had a federal bill. That federal bill that passed about 5 years ago did help curb inflation. It did help reducing some of the impact of that metric that you had mentioned. But we are at a time where fuel efficient vehicles is slowly eroding the transportation dollar, if you will, inflation in the market, and that is why we're at the situation where we are now, and why I mentioned about the state police and getting them out of the motor license fund would free up money that we could apply to paving projects across the state.
And a lot of the federal funding that comes in can't be used for specific things. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's one of the
it sounds good that we're getting the money,
right?
But
and we applaud, and we are very appreciative that Congress passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, or the law that they passed. But when they provided additional federal funds for highways, particularly, they were for large interstate type projects. And Pennsylvania is using that money, and we are putting that money to work, and we are addressing a lot of the needs throughout the state when it comes to our interstates. But that money is ineligible for what we call 3- and 4-digit, mostly our rural and community roads. And there are many, many more of those roads across the state than there are interstate highways. And so therefore, we have to use state resources to fund those kind of roads, and that is why this is becoming a state problem. We're doing very well right now on the interstates, and we see a lot of those projects going on throughout the state, but we really are falling behind on those type of paving jobs in our rural and suburban 3- and 4-digit roads, if you will.
Well, could you talk to us about this tactic of perhaps engaging in short-term bonding to try to deal with some of the budget shortfalls.
Yeah, we had a proposal during last year's budget, and Senator Judy Ward, chairwoman of the Senate Transportation Committee, sponsored a bill to do just this. And because we've seen a series of, I would say, Band-Aids or short-term funding bailouts for the public transit, we really haven't had a similar thing for the highway side. And so we've proposed a opportunity that if you move that money out of the state police, that money could be freed up to leverage approximately about $600 million in 1 to 2 year bonds revenue that would help us get over the same short-term crisis that we are that the transit folks receive their money for. So that is a proposal that is in play. We know it's not popular, but it is a way that you could provide some short-term infusion into the program.
So, Jason, what is APC going to do about all this? You know, we just had Representative Struzzi on with us, and we know that this budget process is just getting underway. You're a little bit disappointed in the governor's plan. What is the plan for APC? What are you going to do?
Well, I think there's a recognition, and we have begun working with what we call the Keystone Funding Coalition, which goes back to my comments about this needs to be a multimodal approach. And we used the Keystone Coalition back in 2013.
Again, that coalition is what?
That coalition comprises of highways and bridges, us, APC, the public transit folks, the aviation community, the local government groups. It is really a group that comes together, and anybody that touches highways or public transit has come together and recognizes a multimodal approach.
Okay, thank you.
And so that group is going to do some education. We recognize that we have to educate the legislators. 89% of the legislature wasn't here when Act 89 passed, so we need to do a re-education. But we're also going to advocate for that multimodal approach. If everyone benefits from a transportation package, and that's going to be our focus as we go into this General Assembly and the next.
So, as you work towards this multimodal approach, are you looking? Is it just a funding issue? Are there any other initiatives involved? Legislation you're going to be looking for, anything like that, or just is it all going to be the funding aspect?
I think the primary focus of the coalition is the funding aspect.
Okay.
That is kind of the tie that binds us all together. If the water rises for everybody, then everyone benefits. But there are some specific things that we're working on with the department in our particular case when it comes to the workforce development phase space. There's also some new ways of doing highway construction with some procurement reform and some other ways to deliver projects rather than the old traditional ways. And so those are some pieces of legislation that we have introduced. Chairman Struzzi has been behind a proposal called Design Build Best Value. He sponsored a bill for that last session, and so we are looking to do things like that going into the future.
That's great.
Okay, well, thank you very much for being with us, and we'll ask you to say hello to Bob for us.
Will do.
And we look forward to you coming again, and too. And we look forward to seeing all of you again next week for another episode of Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.